Anthony Wayne Kirkland's story begins with a brutal act that foreshadowed a far darker path. In 1987, he raped and murdered his girlfriend Leola Douglas after she refused to have sex with him. To cover his tracks, he set her body on fire, a grim tactic that would become his signature. Though charged with voluntary manslaughter, not murder, Kirkland was sentenced to 10 to 25 years in prison. Behind bars, he earned his GED and even an associate's degree, with over 20 disciplinary actions on his record. Still, thanks to a ruling by the Ohio Supreme Court that emphasized his conviction over the severity of his crime, Kirkland was granted parole in 2004, after serving just 16 years. But freedom would not mean redemption. For Kirkland, it was only the beginning of something far worse. After walking out of prison in 2004, Anthony Kirkland was a free man, but instead of turning his life around, he unleashed the darkest, most vicious chapter yet. It started in 2006 when 14-year-old Casonia Crawford went missing, a bright teen with her whole life ahead of her, until she crossed paths with Kirkland. He strangled her and in his twisted signature move set her body on fire, but she wouldn't be the last.
I'm sure she was old enough to be doing it. She actually said that she was old enough to be doing a lot of things. So I ain't sitting there talking and playing with that. She get mad and she looked like she said a couple of things. And then when she got mad, I got mad.
Then what'd you do?
She need me.
Just 1 month later, 45-year-old Mary Jo Newton, a woman battling addiction and vulnerability, also fell victim to Kirkland's brutality. Same pattern: strangled, burned, discarded. Her death barely made headlines.
She died in the van?
Yes.
How did she die? What happened to cause her death?
And she told me that the death would probably be a good thing. The way her life has been.
By the end of that year, in December, 25-year-old Kimya Rollison was found dead. She was a mother, a sister, a daughter. Another life extinguished by a man who had already proven once before what he was capable of.
She had a knife.
So she had the knife, you just turned it on her because she came after you.
Right.
Where did you hit her?
In the throat.
And where at the throat?
The jugular. I told her the blood was coming up. It was coming up too fast, too quick. And she told me she couldn't feel her legs. I started trying to get more. But then I don't know, I held her.
But the murder that shocked the community and finally brought Kirkland down for good was that of 13-year-old Esme Kenny in March 2009.
Did you knock her out? Where is she now? Where'd you move her to? Do we need to find her right away, or?
Esme was a gifted 7th grader, quiet, thoughtful, with a love for music. She went out for a jog and never came home. When police found Kirkland near her body, he was carrying her iPod and her watch, trophies from a life he had stolen.
This wristwatch and this radio belong to this missing girl.
Are you serious?
I'm asking you.
If you told me that would change a lot of things.
How so?
Now I can see your point in talking to me.
In just 3 years, he had murdered 4 females, 2 women, 2 children, and in every case, he left behind ashes, trauma, and a growing pile of evidence. Anthony Kirkland had turned parole into a death sentence for the innocent.
What made you kill her?
Hearing that I'm sorry, and I told her that she was a lion. Just like all the women that can destroy my life.
When Anthony Kirkland finally stood trial, the weight of his crimes filled the courtroom like a thundercloud. But before the jury could even hear all the evidence, Kirkland made a chilling move. He pled guilty to the murders of Mary Jo Newton and Kimya Rollison, along with the abuse of a corpse charges.
.02A, special felony. What is your plea? Guilty or not guilty?
She said that she'll do whatever I wanted. Just don't hurt her. I asked her if I could have sex with her. She said she hadn't done it before. I told her that's the same thing that I have been hearing from everybody else.
Did you have sex with her?
After that. She told me she wouldn't tell nobody. I didn't believe her.
So is that when you choked her?
From the back.
On March 12, 2010, the jury returned with a verdict, guilty on all remaining counts, including the most severe, the death penalty specifications tied to the brutal slayings of 14-year-old Casonia Crawford and 13-year-old Esme Kenny, and so the jury gave its recommendation, death.
We, the jury, being duly impaneled and sworn, do hereby find by proof beyond a reasonable doubt that the aggravating circumstances that the defendant was found guilty of committing do outweigh the mitigating factors presented in this case. We therefore unanimously recommend that the sentence of death should be imposed upon Anthony Kirkland.
The details were too gruesome to ignore. The cold pattern of strangulation and burning. There was no remorse, no defense strong enough to erase what he had done.
Did you kill her?
No, sir.
Then how did she die because of your anger?
Because had I not bothered that mirror from the first place.
You punched her, you kicked her, you stomped her. This is a child. It's a young child we're talking about here. You want to play like games?
I'm not playing no game with you, man.
Well, you know what? She's defenseless. You're cat and mouse with me. I killed her because of my hatred. Well, what does that mean?
Because that's part of the burial.
On March 31st, 2010, the judge made it official. Kirkland was sentenced to death for the murders of Esme Kenny and Casonia Crawford, two young girls whose lives he violently ended. On top of that, he received 70 years to life for the killings of Mary Jo Newton and Kimya Rollison.
We as a people, as believers in the rule of law and justice, are going to have the death penalty imposed on the worst of the worst. Then, if not you, Anthony Kirkland.
Today, Anthony Kirkland sits on death row at the Ohio State Penitentiary, locked in a cage, facing the fate he so ruthlessly inflicted on others. But this wouldn't be the last time we'd see a killer react to their own death sentence, because the next case, it's even more shocking. On a calm afternoon in June 2024, horror struck without warning. 33-year-old Bianca Ellis is accused of committing one of the most senseless, brutal acts imaginable, fatally stabbing 3-year-old Julian Wood in broad daylight right outside a Giant Eagle in North Olmsted. According to authorities, Ellis had stolen 2 knives from a nearby thrift store and stalked Julian and his mother, Margot Wood, into the parking lot. Then, without provocation, she launched her attack. Julian, just 3 years old, was stabbed multiple times and didn't survive. His mother, Margot, was also wounded, but she lived to witness the nightmare unfold.
There's a lady with a knife stabbing somebody in the north.
Where?
The Giant Eagle.
She's stabbing somebody?
She's stabbing. She's walking
North
away
Olmsted
from
units
Walking
start
Park
responding to
right
North
now.
Olmsted Giant Eagle. We have several calls with somebody with a knife trying to stab people.
There, stop.
Do you have a description of her?
Yeah, she's a black female. We got eyes on her. She's walking towards Lorraine.
Okay, she's outside now?
She's outside walking.
Okay.
With a knife in hand.
This is going to be a black female walking towards
Black
Lorraine
female
Road with a
black
knife.
shirt, black leggings.
All black?
Here, you're not gonna follow. All black.
Is anybody injured?
Yeah, somebody's injured. I think this kid was stabbed in the mother's shoulder.
Okay, hold on a minute. Ma'am, don't hang up the phone. I'm just going to keep you on hold. I got to get an ambulance heading there, okay?
And what followed in the aftermath only deepened the shock. During her court appearances, Bianca Ellis's behavior raised significant concerns. She refused to acknowledge the judge or respond to questions, often turning her head away from proceedings.
Alice? Miss Alice? Miss Alice?
Yeah.
Please raise your head.
Where is it coming from?
I just need to ask you a few questions. I need to make sure you understand them. Do you have an attorney?
I'm looking for one.
Okay. Do you have the money or means to hire an attorney?
Repeat that.
Do you have the money or means to hire an attorney?
Possible.
Okay. Have you received and read your indictment?
I don't know.
You don't know if you've received it? Have you received it? Ma'am, just tell me whether or not you've received it, please. Miss Ellis, we'll be out of here in a few minutes if you just answer these questions.
Oh.
Miss Ellis, have you received your indictment?
What was her name?
Miss Ellis?
What was her name? The judge. What's the judge's name?
Russo.
Russo.
That's right.
Russo with an R.
Have you received and read your indictment? Yes or no? If you haven't received it, I'm going to send it over there. So you need to tell me that. Miss Ellis, why don't you want to answer these questions?
Disturbingly, she even smiled at times while the charges were being read aloud in court. This conduct contributed to a public perception of her as remorseless and unrepentant, casting a dark shadow over the future of her case.
Or endangering children in violation of Ohio Revised Code Section 2919.22B2. Count 4 alleges that on or about June 3, 2024, the defendant did knowingly cause serious physical harm to J.W. on date of birth 10/29/2020. You do? Do you have the money or means to hire an attorney? Have you received your indictment?
I don't.
Okay. Have you read it?
No.
You have not read it. Okay.
I did not.
We have a copy here. You can read it.
I don't want to read it.
You don't want to read it.
No.
Are you willing to accept that the public defender has read it to you?
I asked her not to.
I'm sorry.
I asked her not to.
You asked her not to. Well, but she did read it to you, correct?
No.
She didn't read it to you.
I read it.
Okay, well, we can read it in open court.
After being deemed incompetent to stand trial last September, Bianca Ellis's case took a dark and frustrating turn. The court ruled that Ellis was not mentally fit to face the charges against her and ordered her to undergo treatment at North Coast Behavioral Health Care. The diagnosis suggested there was a substantial chance she could be restored to competency if given the proper treatment. And so, for several months, she was placed under care and ordered to cooperate with all prescribed medications, including long-acting injectable antipsychotics, as part of the treatment plan.
Allowed by law, if she is provided psychiatric medications to treat her psychotic illness. That being stipulated to, I placed that in a journal entry on September 13th last week. And then on Monday of last week, the 16th, excuse me, the 13th was a Friday, on the 16th, I placed an order based on what the doctor provided us from North Coast. He opined again that involuntary administration of drugs is medically appropriate for her condition, Miss Ellis's condition. So involuntary administration, meaning if Miss Ellis cooperated, that the medication is substantially likely to render her competent to stand trial and come back here to the court and face those charges that are currently pending. I'll place on the record their finding. Their finding is a recommendation that you be referred, ma'am, for an up to 20-day inpatient competency assessment at North Coast Behavioral Health Care. And that's pursuant to the Ohio Revised Code Section 2945.371A. Specifically, a fuller determination about her competency to stand trial may be made in a more lengthy evaluation with 24-hour observation. In following the recommendation of the psychiatrist, the forensic psychiatrist, the court is going to first.
But by February 3rd, 2025, things changed. The court received an update from North Coast Behavioral Health Care, revealing that Ellis had made enough progress to now understand the charges she was facing. She was now deemed capable of moving forward with her trial. The charges against her are nothing short of monstrous, including 1 count of aggravated murder, 2 counts of murder, 2 counts of attempted murder, 2 counts of felonious assault, 1 count of endangering children, 1 count of tampering with evidence, and 1 count of theft. The full scope of her crimes will soon be examined in court as this case continues to unfold with chilling implications.
Date of birth 10/29/2020. Count 6 alleges that on or about June 3, 2024, the defendant did attempt to purposely cause the death of Margot Wood. Count 7 alleges that on or about June 3, 2024, the defendant did attempt to cause the death of Margot Wood as a proximate result of the offender committing or attempting to commit an offense of violence. It is a felony of the first or second degree, to wit, felonious assault, Ohio Revised Code Section 2901.11A1. Count 8 alleges that on or about June 3, 2024, the defendant did knowingly cause serious physical harm to Margot Wood. Count 9 alleges that on or about June 3, 2024, the defendant did.
As of now, Ellis has been found competent to stand trial after undergoing treatment at North Coast Behavioral Health Care.
With a report dated February 3rd, that in fact Ms. Ellis was at this time able to aid her counsel in the ability of moving forward with the trial. That in fact Ms. Ellis could understand the nature and objectives of these proceedings that she faced. She has the capacity to now assist Mr. Mack and Mr. Johnson in her defense. And it is the opinion with reasonable medical certainty that Ms. Ellis has been stabilized and now currently able to move forward with the objectives of moving this case into a jury or a trial status. And so at this time, I'll ask that report has been shared with counsel for the state.
However, despite this development, the trial and sentencing are still pending. The court is preparing to move forward, but the chilling nature of Ellis's actions, combined with her unsettling behavior in court, has left many questioning her true state of mind and what the future holds for her.
11A1 and or endangering children in violation of Ohio Revised Code Section 2919.22B2. Count 4 alleges that on or about June 3, 2024, the defendant did knowingly cause serious physical harm to J.W. on date of birth 10/29/2020.
Our next case takes us to East Cleveland, where the horrifying actions of Michael Madison stunned an entire community. It all began on July 19, 2013, when police responded to a report of a foul odor coming from a detached garage. What they found was something out of a nightmare: the decomposing body of a woman wrapped in plastic lying inside a garage leased to Madison. But that was just the beginning. Within 24 hours, 2 more bodies were found, one discarded in a backyard and the other hidden in the basement of a vacant house. Each of the women had been wrapped similarly, suggesting a chilling pattern. Police quickly secured a search warrant for Madison's apartment, where they discovered even more signs of decomposition. The evidence was overwhelming. After a brief standoff at his mother's house, Madison surrendered to police without incident.
No, we have, I need the car here. You guys, yeah. We can stand right here. Won't bum rush you.
Michael, you got anything to say? Got anything to say to Anthony Sowell? We hear that you're a fan of his.
Anything to say? Are there more bodies?
The 3 victims were soon identified. 28-year-old Shatisha Sheely, who had been missing since the fall of 2012. 38-year-old Angela Deskins, reported missing just a month before the discoveries. And 18-year-old Sherelda Terry, last seen leaving her summer job at a Cleveland elementary school just days before the first body was found. On July 22, 2013, Michael Madison was formally charged with 3 counts of aggravated murder. His bail was set at a staggering $6 million, marking the beginning of a legal process that would reveal even more darkness in a case already defined by its brutality.
We're charged with a single count of failure to provide a notice of an address change, and in that I'm setting a $25,000 bond. In the 576472 case, in which you're charged with a larger number of offenses, including aggravated murder. We're going to continue the bond set below in the amount of $6 million. Because you are charged with one or more sexually oriented offenses, particularly rape, you are ordered to submit to medical tests required by law. The sheriff will take the necessary steps to cause you to be examined by a physician who shall perform or order the performance of one or more tests to determine if you are a carrier of the virus that causes AIDS. These steps will include your detention in custody for a reasonable period to have the AIDS test performed. The results of the test will be communicated in strict...
Michael Madison's trial became one of the most closely watched legal proceedings in Ohio, not only for the gruesome nature of his crimes, but also for the emotional weight carried by the families of his victims. On October 31st, 2013, Madison's attorney entered a not guilty plea to a revised and far more severe indictment. This time, prosecutors made their intentions clear. They were seeking the death penalty. The updated indictment listed a total of 14 charges, including 2 counts of aggravated murder for each of the 3 victims, 3 counts of kidnapping, 3 counts of gross abuse of a corpse, 1 count of rape, and 1 count of weapons possession by an ex-convict. Madison's history as a registered sex offender and his prior convictions for attempted rape and drug offenses only added to the gravity of the charges against him.
Until the imposition of death. He took 3 lives, and now his life will also be taken. That is the ultimate punishment. And that goes to the citizens of Cuyahoga County, that the death penalty is alive and well, and the death penalty is best served for the most heinous of cases in this community. No child should be taken from their parent, and no parent.
The trial officially began on April 4th, 2016, as the prosecution laid out the disturbing evidence, plastic-wrapped bodies, forensic findings, and testimonies linking Madison to each murder. The courtroom atmosphere grew heavier by the day. The defense attempted to humanize Madison and challenge the prosecution's narrative, but the facts were overwhelming.
2 of the victims up with duct tape, placing their legs on each side of their head, and binding and bending the body in half. The third body had electrical cords wrapped around her neck and her feet to secure her in the same position. Michael Madison.
By May 5th, 2016, after less than a day of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict, guilty on all 13 counts. The courtroom was tense, but nothing could prepare those present for what would happen next. On May 20th, 2016, the same jury that found him guilty recommended the death penalty. Then on June 2nd, 2016, Cuyahoga County Common Pleas Judge Nancy McDonnell officially sentenced Madison to death. But what should have been a solemn moment of justice quickly erupted into raw emotion.
And Sherelda Terry to your apartment for your depraved purposes. You went on to abuse the corpses of these 3 victims. You stripped them from the waist down. You folded them in half, binding them so that their feet were up by their ears. You wrapped them in multiple layers of trash bags, and you discarded them. Upon consideration of the relevant evidence, the testimony exhibits admitted in mitigation, it is a judgment of this court that the aggravated circumstances of course of conduct, felony murder, kidnapping, felony murder, rape, of which the defendant was convicted, outweigh the mitigating factors by proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Accordingly, the sentence of death is imposed upon the defendant, Michael Madison, on counts 1, 4, and 7.
He sits here and he smirks and he laughs and he causes...
As the sentence was read, Madison smirked, an act that many interpreted as cruel mockery. That's when Van Terry, the father of 18-year-old Sherelda Terry, stood up to deliver a victim impact statement. Overcome with grief and rage, he suddenly lunged across the courtroom at Madison. Security intervened immediately, and though Terry was briefly detained, he was ultimately released without any charges. Many considered his reaction a deeply human response to unimaginable loss. Madison's legal battle didn't end there. He filed multiple appeals, and on July 21st, 2020, the Ohio Supreme Court unanimously voted to uphold his death sentence. Still, execution in Ohio often takes years due to the lengthy appeals process. Madison had been scheduled for execution on May 15th, 2024, but that date came and went without resolution. Ohio Supreme Court Chief Justice Sharon Kennedy granted a stay, allowing for all of Madison's appeals to be fully exhausted. As of now, Michael Madison remains on death row, awaiting an uncertain but inevitable fate, while the families of his victims continue to carry the weight of a tragedy that shocked a nation. Now let's move to a case that left even highly professional investigators shocked: the disturbing story of Granville Ritchie. In what can only be described as a heartbreaking betrayal of trust, Ritchie was left alone to watch 9-year-old Felicia Williams, affectionately known as Sugar Plum, by a woman who considered him a friend. But instead of protecting the child, Ritchie sexually battered and then strangled her to death. It started on May 16th, 2014, when Ritchie was asked by a family friend, Felicia's mother's acquaintance, Ebony Wiley, to watch the little girl for just a few hours. Wiley had trusted him. She dropped Felicia off at Ritchie's Temple Terrace apartment that evening while she ran errands. That decision would become the center of one of the most haunting murder cases in Florida history. Just hours later, Wiley will lie to dispatchers that Felicia had vanished, that she had gone to shower, and when she got out, the girl was just gone. No one had seen her leave. No neighbor saw her playing. No one matching her description had wandered the complex.
This first lie that you and the defendant had come up with was... And what was this first lie that you told law enforcement?
That Sugar Plum left out the door. I was taking a shower, and I was in the house with my friend, Ms. Vivette.
And did you give law enforcement?
Right away, officers arrived and began combing the area. Door-to-door interviews, surveillance camera checks, search dogs, everything. But the story didn't sit right.
And again, there is no stone left unturned in the city of Temple Terrace over the next 20 hours looking for this little girl. They go back and they start searching that area.
But later, Ebony Wiley confessed something she'd initially kept from investigators, that Ritchie had sent her out of the apartment that night, asking her to pick up marijuana. That meant at one point, Ritchie was alone with Felicia, and during that window, something unthinkable happened. Then came the next horror. The very next morning, Felicia's body was discovered floating near the Courtney Campbell Causeway, the very stretch of water that connects Tampa to Clearwater. Her small body had been brutally stuffed into a suitcase and tossed into the bay like garbage.
Nobody knows. Felicia's bobbing up and down in the surf on the north side of the Courtney Campbell Causeway, nude and dead. So they interview his mother, and then they call 911. The Clearwater Police Department respond out. Clearwater Fire Department responds out. Detectives, homicide detectives from the Clearwater Police Department respond out. That blue you see in the bottom of the photograph is a tarp. The fire department provided to the Clearwater Police so that they could pull Felicia's body out of the water. And you can actually see her foot at the bottom of that. You can see that shoreline. This isn't a beach. The shoreline is full of jagged rocks and boulders that have barnacles on them. And what you're going to find from the evidence, and I also wanted to show you this. This is an area, this shows the...
Investigators were sickened. The autopsy was worse. Felicia had been sexually assaulted, strangled, and likely still alive when placed into that suitcase. She had suffered. The brutality was beyond comprehension, and the evidence led right back to Ritchie. Police recovered surveillance footage showing Ritchie carrying a suitcase, matching the one Felicia was found in, out of his apartment. When Granville Ritchie's trial finally began in September 2019, the courtroom was tense. This wasn't just a murder trial. This was about the brutal, calculated killing of a 9-year-old girl, Felicia Williams, a child whose last moments were so horrifying, many jurors struggled to even look at the photos shown in court. The prosecution came out swinging. From the start, they painted a picture of pure evil.
Her arms that were floating face down, and her face. Her back, there's almost no injury at all on her back. It's the part that was being braided back and forth on the rocks, causing incised and abrasive damage to her body. All of it post-mortem, all of it afterwards, because she's dead when she's thrown in water. All of these injuries, the medical examiner who examined her and another medical examiner who's been consulted on this case will tell you all of those came from the waves, from hours and hours of being there at that location, up and down on the rocks. And I want to show you this. I'll show it very fast and brief. That's a photo of what it did to her body, the rocks. So you can see the abrasiveness got so deep into the skin. I'll take it off for the record, it's not up anymore. It basically degraded her skin down past the pigment level, and that's why you see the bleached appearance and the white appearance in pink. Clearwater Police Department detectives come out. They're notified about a missing child report that
They told the jury how Richie lured little Felicia into his bedroom, how he sexually assaulted her, strangled her, and then, with chilling calmness, stuffed her body into a suitcase and dumped her into Tampa Bay like she was nothing. A child left in his care by a trusted friend. Prosecutors brought forensic experts to the stand who testified that Richie's DNA was found on Felicia's body, clear proof of sexual contact. The autopsy confirmed that she had been manually strangled and had sustained blunt force trauma to her head and neck. The timeline of her death lined up almost perfectly with when Richie had been left alone with her.
Can you describe manual strangulation?
Briefly, it's a compression of the blood vessels in the neck that cause a lack of blood flow to the brain. That then affects the heart rate, and the individual's heart eventually stops beating, and they end up unconscious first, but eventually dead.
Typically, people think of strangulation as putting pressure.
You've testified these injuries are consistent with sexual assault, sexual battery, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And consistent with being caused during penetration by either the use of a penis or some other object?
Some object, that object could be a penis.
Is this area of the human body, of Felicia's body, a highly innervated area?
Yes, sir.
And is it sensitive, that area of the body?
Yes, sir.
And does it have a higher level of sensitivity than other portions of the body because of its purpose, I guess, as far as reproduction?
Yes, sir.
Does that contribute to that?
Yes, sir.
These are sexual organs, correct?
It's the entrance to the...
Then came the surveillance footage. Crucial evidence. Cameras had captured Richie driving toward the Courtney Campbell Causeway that night and returning later without the suitcase he had left with. That same suitcase, or one identical to it, was later found empty in the bay, and Felicia's body was discovered nearby, nude and waterlogged, bearing the unmistakable marks of assault and murder. The most damning testimony came from the woman who had left Felicia in Richie's care, a close family friend who had trusted him. She broke down on the stand, recounting the moment she realized Felicia was gone, the desperation in her voice as she called police, and the shock when the truth came out.
I said I left her with Trevor, and he wanted me to go and get some weed for him. And then when I came back, she wasn't there.
Did you tell them that you had gone to the CVS looking for her?
I'm not sure. I told them all that. I don't even think they gave me a chance to tell them all that. They just arrested me. They said, you're arrested for giving false information.
And was this third time, this third story that you told them, was that then the truth of what happened?
Yes.
Everything that you have testified to here as to what you did on that day?
Richie's defense team tried to raise doubts, suggesting someone else could have killed Felicia or that the evidence didn't prove intent, but it fell flat. His courtroom demeanor didn't help either. Just like during the investigation, Richie sat emotionless. No remorse, no reaction, not even when Felicia's family sobbed during testimony.
Good morning. Granville Richie remains innocent. The presumption of innocence remains. It doesn't matter how many times the state of Florida, through the prosecutor, Mr. Harmon, stands up here and tells you that he has proven by evidence, crystal clear, he says, evidence, that Granville Ritchie murdered Felicia Williams, that Granville Ritchie committed sexual battery against Felicia Williams, and that Granville Ritchie committed aggravated battery against Felicia Williams.
You get back to yourself, you get on your knees and you pray. Because the journey you got ahead of you, gonna need God. I forgive you. I ain't got no anger towards you, bro. Abraham was willing to sacrifice his child. I sacrificed mine. I was you. I once was you. But in that same courtroom, I was a monster. I'm pretty sure they don't told you about me. I'm the one you don't want to see, bro. You took something from me you can't get back. I don't want no revenge. I gave it to my God. The same God that you play with, I gave it to him. And he took that pressure from me. That I couldn't deal with myself. A lot of people would have suffered if I would have dealt with it. But the fact that it took 6 years, man, for you to be a man and admit to what you done wrong. All these people you hurt, man. Well, phone calls 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, man. And I gotta get up my bed and go console her. Go get her from the gravesite 4 in the morning when she there crying about my baby. That's the woman you gotta have to forgive. Let me tell you one thing about her, bro. It's hard for her to forgive. I've been dealing with for the last 17 years. And I'm still asking her for forgiveness. But I forgive you, bro. That's how strong my God is. I come in and smile at you today with no harm or ill will towards you. You my brother. You made a mistake. But you got time. You got time to get right with God, bro. Like I said, I once was you. I was a monster. I was just like you. So if my God can change me to make me a better man, can't do that. I celebrate the day. September 13, 2017. I've been out 3 years. They told me I'd never stay out 3 years and make it on these streets. Not only have I been out 3 years, started my own.
After 2 weeks of trial, the jury took just 1 hour to find Granville Ritchie guilty on all counts: first-degree murder, sexual battery of a child under 12, and aggravated child abuse.
In the Circuit Court of 13th Judicial Circuit of the State of Florida in Hillsborough County, Penal Justice Division, State of Florida versus Granville Ashanti Ritchie, case number 14 CF 11992, Division Trial Division 1. Verdict form. We, the jury, find as follows as to count one of the charge. The defendants give the first-degree murder as charged. The killing was premeditated murder and felony murder based on a finding of guilt by sexual battery, victim less than 12, defendant over 18, and count 2, or aggravated child abuse, and count 3. We, the jury, find as follows as to count 2 other charges. The defendant is guilty of sexual battery, victim less than 12 years of age, defendant over 18 of age as charged. We, the jury, find as follows as to count 3 other charges. The defendant is guilty of aggravated child abuse as charged. So say we all date this 25th day of September 2019. Christine Bennett, 4-person of the jury. Is that the understood the jury hold?
But the trial wasn't over. It moved immediately into the penalty phase, where the same jury had to decide life in prison or death. The prosecution argued for death, calling Ritchie a sadistic predator with no conscience. They emphasized how vulnerable Felicia was, how much she trusted him, and how violently he violated that trust in the worst way imaginable. They said the cruelty and depravity of the murder demanded the ultimate punishment.
Forcing their body, not a gun against somebody's head, they're forcing their body with the use of violence or by violence into the body of a woman. That's what makes this case, or makes this crime and this aggravating factor increase the gravity of this murder. And of course, That aggravating effect is elevated exponentially by the fact that this wasn't a woman. This was a little girl. Little girls and their private parts. It's a special place for little girls. These aggravating circumstances, as I've said, they tower because they are giant pillars of proof. They really are. They're like mountains of proof with deep running, deep.
Richie showed no emotion, not when the photos were shown, not when Felicia's name was spoken over and over again, not when her mother begged the court for justice. Just like during the trial, stone-faced, empty.
Verdict? Is this your verdict?
Yes.
Is this your verdict? Yes. Is this your verdict?
Yes.
Is this your verdict?
Yes.
Is this your verdict?
Yes.
Is this your...
After brief deliberation, the jury came back with a 10 to vote in favor of the death penalty, the legal threshold under Florida law at the time. On September 26, 2019, Judge Michelle Cisco formally sentenced Granville Ritchie to death.
In the instant case, the jury unanimously found that each of the aggravating factors presented by the state were proven beyond a reasonable doubt, and that the aggravating factors outweighed the mitigating circumstances presented by defendant. The jury unanimously found that defendant should be sentenced to death. As such, the court has now conducted its own weighing process as required by law. Mr. Ritchie, I need you to stand and please approach the podium.
Now we move on to our final and perhaps most deeply twisted case, the one involving Chad Guy Daybell, the self-proclaimed prophet and apocalyptic author at the center of what's come to be known as the Vallow Daybell Doomsday Murders. Chad Daybell wasn't just a husband or a writer. He was the manipulative mind behind a web of killings, delusions, and destruction masked by religion. Together with Lori Vallow, the two led what many now describe as a fringe Mormon offshoot cult rooted in bizarre beliefs about spiritual possession, zombies, and an impending end-of-days scenario. Things began unraveling in February 2019 when Chad told his neighbors, Todd and Alice Gilbert, that he had a vision, a spiritual premonition, that his wife Tammy would die before turning 50. That vision came true 10 days later when Tammy Daybell was found dead in her home. Chad claimed she had gone to bed with a bad cough and simply died in her sleep. Suspicious? Yes, but at the time, Tammy's death was ruled natural, in large part because Chad declined an autopsy, and the local coroner honored his wishes. Meanwhile, Chad quietly collected $430,000 in life insurance payouts.
Her home by a man covered in black. She thought it was a paintball gun. On October 19th, 10 days later, she died in her own home with her husband present. This was soon after an increase in the value of her life insurance to more than $400,000.
Within a week of Tammy's death, Chad told the Gilberts he'd found the woman he was going to marry. That woman was Lori Vallow, who had just recently lost her own husband and, as Chad falsely claimed, her only daughter. The Gilberts recalled Chad and Lori acting inappropriately giddy and affectionate, laughing, giggling, as though nothing tragic had ever happened. Then came the autopsy. After authorities exhumed Tammy's body, long after her death had faded from public attention, forensic experts confirmed what many had suspected all along. Tammy had been murdered by asphyxiation, but those results weren't publicly released until April 2023 during Lori Vallow's trial. By that point, investigators had also uncovered disturbing text messages between Chad and Lori. The two described Tammy as being in limbo and claimed she was possessed by an evil spirit named Viola. They referred to her as a zombie, just like they had previously described Lori's own children, Tylee Ryan and JJ Vallow, who were later found buried in shallow graves on Chad Daybell's property.
Dead children. Buried in the defendant Chad Daybell's backyard in September of 2019. The next month, his wife is found dead in their marital bed. 17 days after the death of his wife, Tammy Daybell, this defendant is photographed laughing and dancing on a beach in Hawaii at his wedding. It's Lori Vallow, a woman who was his mistress and the mother of the children buried in the graves on his property. 3 dead bodies. This defendant believed he had a right beyond the ordinary.
On June 9th, 2020, everything finally came crashing down. That day, police uncovered human remains buried in shallow, unmarked graves in Chad Daybell's backyard during a court-authorized search of the property. The horrific discovery confirmed what many had feared for months. Tylee Ryan and JJ Vallow were dead. Tylee's remains were found in a section of the yard the Daybell family had chillingly referred to as the Pet Cemetery, the same area used to bury their cats and dogs. Her body had been burned, her hands severed, and her bones fractured in ways that suggested attempted dismemberment. Due to the extreme condition of her remains, Tylee's cause of death was officially ruled as homicide by unspecified means.
And that's tradition. As Lori refused to produce her children, law enforcement continued their search for Tylee and JJ. During that search, they located a unique text message that this defendant, Chad Daybell, had sent to his wife, Tammy, on September 9, 2019, which was the day after Tylee Ryan's last known appearance. You'll hear from the FBI agent who found that message, but this message seemed longer than his usual text to Tammy, and it had a more conversational tone. In that text, Chad claimed he'd had an interesting morning, that he'd shot a raccoon, that he'd buried it in what they called the Pet Cemetery, and that he'd had a fire on the property where he'd burned some wood debris. When law enforcement finally went to the defendant's property the following June, they didn't find a raccoon. They found Tylee's burnt remains were buried in the Pet Cemetery.
JJ's remains were discovered in a separate location near a pond. In a disturbing contrast to Tylee, JJ had been carefully wrapped in plastic and bound with duct tape, buried under a layer of rocks and wooden planks. His cause of death was clear: asphyxiation with a plastic bag over his head and duct tape over his mouth. During the search, Chad called Lori in jail, warning her that police were on the property. Moments later, he attempted to flee the scene in his car, but authorities quickly apprehended him. He was arrested for obstruction or concealment of evidence, and his bail was set at $1 million. The break in the case came through cell phone data, specifically that of Alex Cox, Lori's brother. On September 9th, 2019, the day after Tylee was last seen alive, Alex's phone pinged at Lori's home in the middle of the night and later that morning on Chad's property. Similarly, on September 23rd, the day after JJ's final sighting, Alex's phone once again pinged at Chad's backyard. Even more chilling was a text message Chad sent to Tammy on September 9th, the same day Tylee is believed to have been killed. In it, Chad casually claimed he had shot a raccoon and buried it in the pet cemetery. Investigators flagged that immediately. Raccoons are nocturnal, and nothing about the message felt right. By June 10th, both the Woodcock and Ryan families confirmed the remains were those of Tylee and JJ Rexburg police. The horror of these findings only deepened the public's sense of revulsion. In August, Chad Daybell was excommunicated from the LDS Church for his radical teachings. By July 2020, prosecutors had dropped the earlier charges against Lori for desertion, and instead charged her with obstruction and concealment of evidence. Her bond was reduced to $150,000, but she remained in custody. Chad, meanwhile, still faced a $1 million bond and remained jailed. Then came the formal charges that everyone had anticipated. On May 25th, 2021, both Chad and Lori were indicted on multiple counts, including conspiracy to commit first-degree murder for the deaths of Tylee, JJ, and Tammy Daybell, grand theft by deception related to financial benefits for the children.
His desire for sex, money, and power led him to pursue those ambitions, and this pursuit led to the deaths of his wife and Lori's 2 innocent children. Chad Daybell is an author who wrote books about the apocalypse. During this trial, you will hear a story more troubling, and the story is real. Chapter 1. The defendant was a seemingly ordinary man. You'll see that he craved significance. He worked in journalism, and he worked as a sexton in a graveyard. He married his wife, Tammy.
During closing arguments, prosecutor Lindsay Blake laid out a devastating summary. Chad had not only orchestrated the killings, but had wrapped them in a religious justification to manipulate others into carrying them out. Just days later, on June 1st, 2024, Chad Daybell was sentenced to death. He offered no mitigating evidence, no statement, no apology.
Of Tylee Ryan, upon the jury's finding of guilty and return of the special verdict form, the jury finding beyond a reasonable doubt and having returned the special verdict that the aggravating circumstances when weighed against the mitigating circumstances do not make the imposition of the death penalty unjust. The court therefore, on count 1, the defendant is sentenced to death. On count 2, the first-degree murder of Tylee Ryan, the jury finding beyond a reasonable doubt and having returned the special verdict that the aggravating circumstances when weighed against the mitigating circumstances do not make the imposition of the death penalty unjust. The court therefore, on count 2, sentences the defendant to death. On count 3, the conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and grand theft by deception for the murder of J.J. Vallow, the jury finding beyond a reasonable doubt and having returned the special verdict that the aggravating circumstances when weighed against the mitigating circumstances do not make the imposition of the death penalty unjust. The court therefore, on count 3, sentences the defendant to these offenses. Is there any statement you would like to make before I proceed with sentencing on those counts?
No.
Each of those 2 counts, the court is going to impose a prison sentence of 15 years. So a 15-year sentence will be imposed on count 7. The court will take under advisement the issue of restitution.
Chad Daybell is now on death row at the Idaho Maximum Security Institution, awaiting his final judgment. From the brutal murder of FW at the hands of Granville Ritchie to the calculated, cold-hearted doomsday killings orchestrated by Chad Daybell, these are stories that shake us to our core. Stories of innocent lives stolen by predators hiding behind masks of normalcy, charisma, or even faith. These weren't just crimes. They were betrayals of trust, of humanity, and of the most sacred bonds we hold. If these stories moved you, don't scroll away in silence. Share this video, and if you believe it's time we stop giving killers the last word and start fighting for justice, awareness, and prevention, smash that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. See you in the next video.